planning for school sites through the subdivision process, presentation of sites, and Howard County Public School System participation in the development review process.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
If I may, I'm going to set the tone for each one of these agenda items with factual information and data that we have, because I don't think all of our board members and council members have the exact data on this. So let me talk about this, and then Mr. Scott Washington is on reserve to provide more information. As you know, the Howard County Public School Systems currently has 7 sites included within our land bank. The pending agreement for Turf Valley site would be the 8th property. Current sites include 10 acres on Sunny Spring Drive in Hawthorne, 41 acres on Marriottsville Road, 9 acres where the Faulkner Ridge building currently sits, 10 acres in Clary's Forest, 11 acres in Dickinson Park, 11 acres in Huntington Park, and 79 acres at Mission Road, where the High School 13 is being built. We are not aware of any other properties we currently hold on reservation. Additional specific information on reservations of land could be provided by the Office of School Planning. Now, the development process, as many of you know, that we participate in the development review process in 2 ways. The first is the school designation. Is it the school designation where a new development is proposed? The county will contact the Howard County Public School System Office of School Planning and request a designation of which schools that the development would be assigned to. These are identified and responded to with a school designation letter. Secondly, the manager of the school planning participates in the subdivision review committee to review developments and provide comments from the school system perspective, primarily related to transportation needs. They will look to make sure there are sufficient sidewalks, crosswalks, ability for bus participation, and pads for students to gather and wait for buses. As developments are identified and evaluated, the prospective yields of students are noted by the Office of School Planning, and these yields are used within the annual projections for years for the students are anticipated to include in the annual feasibility study. As the county begins the process to update the general plan, Board Member Vicky Cutroneo and Howard County Public School System Chief Administrative Officer Jahanteb Siddiqui will serve on the Planning Advisory Committee so that the Howard County Public School System can continue to be a part of the conversations that will occur during the process. In addition, we will ensure that the data, projections, funding implications, and other relevant information that be helpful during this process is provided as necessary. Our school planning staff does a wonderful job, as you know, in working with their planning and zoning counterparts, and will continue to support this effort over the next few years. I wanted to prime the conversation with the introductory data and open for questions. Mr. Washington, please stand by.
All right, so are there any specific questions here? I guess I have one. Go ahead, Ms. Cutroneo, why don't you're the expert here.
I know.
You are. That's why we put you on the pack, yes.
No, I just wanted to get clarification on the school site that's at the corner of Route 40 and Marriottsville. That's a future middle school site. And I keep hearing that that's not a great site for a school. I just want to get clarification on that. Is that a site that is eventually going to be a school site, or are we just holding on to it for to sell? Or I guess I just want to, because we are in need of a middle school.
Talk about the 41 acres at Marriott Road. Mr. Washington, please, are you on?
I sure am. Good morning, Scott Washington, Chief Operating Officer. As you know, Ms. Cutroneo, thank you for that question once again. That is a site that we're currently holding and potentially still could be used for middle school site at one day. It is not just a site that we're just holding on to, but we're looking at potential use for that site in the future.
Okay, because I've heard from some in the community that it's not a tenable site for a school. It's so I just wanted to get publicly clarification on that.
Correct.
So that it is a good tenable site for a school.
It is a site that we can develop when we need to have it for a school potentially. Absolutely.
And if we had money, we could develop a site right now. Okay.
It is also true.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Washington and Dr. Martriano, I will take note of the fact that it does appear that 3 of these school sites are in the downtown, what I guess would be considered the downtown Columbia area. And as we know from the school feasibility projections, that downtown Columbia area is slated to be considerably over capacity, particularly at the elementary school level, in a very short period of time, both because of all of the construction and development going on down there, as well as the projections for people moving in and out. And I am concerned that there's no school planned. This is one of the few places where we have plenty of sites, but no school planned for any of those sites. And I'm wondering how the school district is planning on addressing that issue.
Excellent question. And as you know, that I just presented to the board our capital improvement plan for the next 10 years, as well as then for the upcoming year. And I believe several of the council members were observing that particular meeting. You're absolutely right. And again, all these decisions are predicated on when those enrollment numbers emerge, how we can manage our existing funding and fund to keep the existing projects which we have in motion right now. So I want to frame that by stating that. Mr. Washington, would you please add some additional granular information to that particular comment?
Sure. Good morning once again. One of the items that was taken into account for that area is ES 44, and that is actually in the 2020 feasibility study. ES 43 currently is slated for the southeast area as well. That is on the Mission Road site, as we discussed before. I know there's been some concern between 43, 44, and 45 locations based off the projection numbers, but that is our current plan. So ES 43 for the southeast area, ES 44, which is in the feasibility study for 2020, which shows us on that site or in that area, let's just say. And of course, there's the ES 45 that's been pushed out to later on.
So ES 44 when you say it's in that area, has one of the sites been chosen, the Clary's Forest, the Faulkner Ridge? I know that you have big plans, Dr. Martriano, for Faulkner Ridge, so I'll stop mentioning that because I know what you would like to do with it, but Clary's or Sunny Spring, either one of those sites has a focus and I guess they're about the same size. They're both looks like around 10 acres.
Correct.
I should also ask, is that a typical acreage for an elementary school?
Thank you. Great questions all the way around. Once again, none of the sites specifically have been chosen for the school as of yet, as they will both work, or they will all work in that area. So we haven't, once we get closer to when we need those schools, we'll select which site that will actually go on, and because they're in that general area, they will work. But at the same time, as you just stated, usually for a elementary school, you want at least 10 acres. And I have Mr. Luby on here if I need any additional information. But usually Mr. Luby is 10 acres, and then it's also 1 acre for every 1,000 kids. So, or for every 100 kids in this case for the elementary school area. So pretty much for the most part, those schools would work. We do have schools on sites that are that size currently right now, honestly speaking. So they would work. We need to have a school on those sites, even up to the larger models.
Chair Young, may I also add for the council, my concern right now, what keeps me up late at night, are the 3 projects that we currently have in motion: Hammond renovation, High School 13, which is moving forward, and Talbot Springs. Now, Talbot Springs also in Columbia adds enrollment with the new building which we're adding. My concern as we move through this is the funding to sustain those projects to completion. Right. And I just want to add that information. And Scott, we, as Chair Young has talked about the enrollment issues, Talbot Springs adds how many additional seats to the Columbia area?
160 seats is what we were slating for that school, sir.
So that will provide some relief. Thank you.
Mr. Youngman?
I was just listening to Dan talk about or Dr. Martriano talk about the school site. For downtown Columbia, you can't build a suburban elementary school, a suburban designed elementary school. We're not going to have sites that big, and already throughout, I think, the eastern side of the county, we don't have sites that big. I guess it's a question for Scott. Like,
Sure.
What work is being done to look at other types of developing schools, other models of schools that are more suited to high density, almost urban environments?
Thank you for that question, Mr. Youngman, and
You're
you're
welcome.
absolutely correct. We have been looking at that because one of the things we actually talked about is not just a prototype, but what's called an archetype. And what that is that's a school that we can kind of adjust and adapt to fit a particular area. Actually, to be quite honest with you, when we did our last pool of consultants for our designs, that was one of the things that we have really was one of the main reasons what we picked the firms we picked was basically looking at what kind of other designs, maybe more condensed designs, or based off of the site we have because of those constraints we can do. So I think that the key is not thinking so much prototype, but thinking more of archetype, because an archetype means you have the basic areas that you need, and then based off of the site we have, we can make adjustments. As you're correct, I think about Duckett's Lane, that was a 10-acre site. As you see, that's a linear school on that type of site. Even Hanover Hills, that's a small site there as well that we were able to get that school on. And because of concerns like that, we wanted to have more flexibility going forward. That is very much a big item that we're looking at and basically moving forward, because you're right, our land restrictions are much more as we go well.
Ms. Walsh.
Thank you, Chair Young. I'm the one who asked for this to be on the agenda. And what I wanted to do was elevate a section of the code that was discussed in a recent BOE legislative meeting. It's section 16.122 in the development regulations article. And that's the part of the code that actually empowers county agencies, including the Board of Education, to ask that certain land be reserved, not just for a bus stop or for sidewalk, but to actually construct the schools. That list of properties that you read off, Dr. Martriano, not one of them is in District 1, right? Over and over again, I hear these lists, I go to these meetings, I hear you talk about an urban prototype. Those two schools that Mr. Washington listed are in Elk Ridge, not in an urban setting, or weren't intended to be in an urban setting. We are making exceptions over and over again not to build schools, particularly in District 1, but particularly where it is profitable to build homes. And so what I wanted to do was elevate that section of the code and remind this council and the Board of Education that you have the power during the subdivision review process to say, hold it, you're going to put, for example, Laurel Park, 1,000 homes in here, or milk producers. What is the yield for some of these biggest developments, and how is that going to destroy a setup that exists now in terms of schools overcrowded at every level? And what can be done with land that is nearby where the biggest impacting developments are? I think we could probably do better in terms of defining what would be the concern. Is it X number of units or X number of bedrooms? Is it a certain development above a certain threshold of acres? But we just seem mired in this reactive state. And the consequence of that, most particularly in recent history, has been borne by the District 1 students. But I see the list from the most recent development monitoring report, and these are 780 units still to be built, 394 to be built at milk producers, 469 in Turf Valley, 230 at Dorsey Center. It's not just District 1, but I think it is really important that we take more of the control that is allowed us under existing code that's been in place since 1992 to actually do something proactive to help the kids in these schools. So, as a legislator, I'm happy to tinker with that language at 122. I'm happy to encourage you as a board to better define in your policies what you do and what are the thresholds that would require your planning office to say, hold the phone. I think there should be affirmative statements that say if X, Y, and Z, if these thresholds are met, then these people have to make an affirmative statement that we don't need land there, that we have made this determination and we're okay with this going forward without exercising our rights under the code. But that's why I asked for this to be in here. the recent development monitoring report has 5,000 units coming in. And they're in big chunks in lots of places that you know about in downtown Columbia, but it's not exclusively downtown Columbia. And that's where I hear those land banks being now. So I'm happy to continue that conversation offline, but I want it in the forefront. I don't want it to kind of disappear for another 10 or 15 years. We need to use the rights that we have under law right now.
I happily associate myself with your comments and agree wholeheartedly, and I hope that Ms. Cutroneo and Mr. Siddiqui will advance that during the discussions, and that we will keep that alive in terms of the conversations in the future. I really commend you for bringing that forward, because we need to knock down all the barriers that are preventing us from establishing a land bank that is realistic and really what we need for our county. You said it beautifully, and I commend you for your words, and I really ask that we all gather around that in the discussions which we have, because it is a challenge to obtain the land in the normal process for schools in Howard County. Thank you very much.
I just want to add, I'll call you on in a second, Dr. Wu. I just want to add that we have 2 task force groups that have begun meeting and that are ongoing now. One is to look at a way to better refine our process for predicting students, and Ms. Cutroneo and Christina Delmont Small and Kirsten Coombs from the school board are on that task force, myself and Ms. Walsh from the county council, and we met, I think it was last week, and have sent out notes from that task force meeting. And the other group is what we called Dr. Martriano's out-of-the-box group, which Dr. Wu is heading up. And we're looking again at ways to maybe remove some of these children from our school, the physical school buildings that we have right now, and into other settings that will allow to alleviate some overcrowding. But obviously, I think most of us are pretty concerned with the issues that Ms. Walsh brought up, or we wouldn't be actually having these breakout groups to try and address some of these issues, at least individually in these task force. And Dr. Wu, why don't you make your comment?
Thank you, Chair Yang. So I have a question. I think this is really long-term vision for the downtown Columbia. So we passed a plan several years ago for the new development in downtown. And with a projection of 30,000 new people will come in. And for the whole downtown area, for the whole Columbia, it's 100,000 people. We have 4 to 5 high schools. But for this new downtown development, we haven't scheduled any site for high school. I just wonder what's the council's plan for the new high school site in downtown area, where those students will go in the future, just for one school.
Chair Young, this is Ms. Coombs. A couple of people have told me that they've gotten network errors and they've lost the feed.
Observation, which as a downtown Columbia resident, I can tell you that certainly concerns me that, yes, we're looking at elementary schools, but a high school takes a lot more land than elementary schools. And what are we thinking about for in the event that something is going to be needed on that level?
Yes, so the reason I'm talking about this, because this will not happen, for a few years, maybe happen in 10 years later or 20 years later. What happens if we're not planning for the high school site for the moment to reserve for land, right? The downtown area will be built out. There's no space available in 20 years. And the people sitting on the board right now, either on the county council, on the school board, we just probably were not able to do anything. And for the future board members, they were not able to do anything because there's no land available. I hope that right now, the county council or school board think about this issue. We will not leave the problem for the future people.
Okay, Dr. Martriano.
Well said, Dr. Wu, and I'm, as you all know, I'm greatly interested in advancing innovation into our thinking around the topic of non-traditional ways to address our problems. And I know the work groups, which you just talked about, the innovation pieces, are absolutely critical. So the issue of looking at our Faulkner Ridge site and determining what programmatic issues we could develop there, looking at some land of which we currently have to the establishment of a technical high school, which would provide opportunities for magnet programs and signature programs and choice opportunities. How we define our next two high schools from a programmatic issue has to be a part of our thinking beyond just the establishment of brick and mortar as we're trying to keep up with our accelerated growth. So I'm just advocating for those conversations to happen in tandem as we look at the out of the box things which our county school system is primed to do.
Thank you, Ms. Rigby.
So I think one of the sort of key elements in this when it comes to land acquisition is ensuring that we have the funds available to purchase the land. Historically, that has been one of the biggest holdups. And in regards to the school planning process, I'm really glad we have the process team working on it so they can refine the process that exists between school planning and DPZ to get accurate projections of students that will lend itself to the future school planning. And regarding downtown Columbia, I would like to make, and high schools, I'd like to make another pitch for renovating and expanding Oakland Mills High School, which is literally just across the bridge to downtown. And it's in need of a renovation, and it is absolutely available for expansion. So just wanted to pitch Oakland Mills again as another great option, both for capacity and renovation.
Ms. Cutroneo.
If I could chime in, but
Did someone want to speak? Was that Mr. Washington?
No, that was Dr. Jones, and Dr. Jones, you'll be up next after Ms. Cutroneo.
Okay. Oakland Mills, I agree wholeheartedly with Ms. Rigby on that. I keep pressing. They've been waiting since 2009 for an HVAC renovation, and they are on the long-term plan, just barely, I think for 2030, for expansion, for seats and for renovation. I wanted to speak to the creative use and thinking outside the box, especially as we build up downtown Columbia. And I had brought this up in our task force meeting on Monday, even with like a building such as the Cultural Center, which is, planned, perhaps bringing in the school system for performing arts magnet component of that with Wild Lake High School. Just to think as we're building other construction that you don't automatically think it's a school system thing, but thinking, how can we bring the school system into this to help relieve capacity and think creatively like that? Because I can't think of a better use for a portion of the cultural center than for our students for performing arts. And there is an appetite in this county for that. And Wild Lake is right there. So just putting that out there. I don't know if it's too late to even consider that, but just as we go forward with the building of downtown Columbia. And the other, to go back to what Ms. Walsh said about advocating for sites at the subdivision point and process of the development process, I think there needs to be more conversation between the Board of Ed and our own Office of Planning, because they're the ones that are engaged at that point. We are, which I do, I troll the DPZ website, I have no life. And so that I find out about things, but I think that that's a conversation that we need to have internally to make sure that the Board of Education, if we're the ones authorized to ask for land to be set aside, we need to know earlier on in the process that this is coming. Otherwise it's too late. And unless you're trolling the website and, that sort of thing, you don't even know until it's too late. So I just wanted to put that out there, that I think that that's an internal thing that the Board of Ed and the Office of Planning need to get more in line with, because, they don't have the authority, we do, to advocate for setting us. And I thank Ms. Walsh for bringing that up. And that's it for my spiel.
Thank you. Dr. Jones?
yes, I was just going to piggyback really fast on what Ms. Rigby said. Ms. Cutroneo mentioned it as well. when we're looking at the deferred maintenance and HVACs, renovations, I should say, I know personally in my district, Oakland Mills High School and Oakland Mills Middle School has an excess together of over $160 million in deferred capital costs. I heard the year 2030, which is 10 years away. With all the plans, I just want to say publicly, I would hope that Oakland Mills High School and Oakland Mills Middle School, things can be done sooner, especially if there are issues now. That's all I was going to say.
I might be wrong on the 2030, it might be 2027, but Mr. Washington could correct me. But they're on there at least in the plan, but I agree, I wish it could be a lot sooner for those schools.
Yeah. I mean, and when we look at the 10-year plan, we look at the, just long-term plans, and we're looking at $160 million of deferred maintenance, one of which was from 2009, over 10 years ago. It's just a little troubling to say, okay, something's been pushed off for 10 years. It may not get touched for another 10 years. Yeah, so there's 20 years of students coming in with possibly subpar HVAC and breathing situations. I'll just leave it at that.
Okay, Mr. Youngman, this will be the last comment on this topic so that we can move on. Oh, I see you have a hand up too.
I changed my mind.
Okay, well, then Ms. Christina Delmont Small.
Thank you. I always appreciate us discussing future capacity and all of that. But I mean, I think we have to go back to where we are now, which is we don't have capacity now for the students we have. So as though we're talking future, and when more building is coming, we're trying to fill a hole as we keep digging the hole. And unfortunately, the only way that we're going to be able to get out of this, there are the three: we need time, we need money, and we need the land. And, Walsh did a fabulous job. She said everything that I would have said regarding District 1 and also the others who have spoken. But we have to change this. And I agree, the board needs to definitely be more proactive and we got this data figured out. And we have to, quite frankly, be more realistic about understanding what units are going to produce, because people still want to move here because of the school system. And that is really the engine that attracts people to come to the county. And if we continue to slip from a capacity perspective, people are, at some point, this is going to go in a totally different direction. So since you all are our funding authority, one of our funding authorities, but the number one when we come to building school, I desperately ask you to do what you can do on your side to focus when we look at capital projects, that we focus on our schools so that we can continue to provide a place for our students to be educated here in Howard County.